Hey everyone, I am Adam Stark, Jet.Build co-founder. Welcome to our live webinar series. This is number 2, so I appreciate y'all joining and or listening in after the fact. So today's topic is going to be ditch the spreadsheets, how automation saves you hours every week. And of course, what I mean by that is leveraging softwares, leveraging cloud platforms to manage teams and projects. That is what's going to save you hours versus, for example, siloed Excel files or any other file versions that are going to be local to each individual's device and or each team's devices, right? If you're an internal SharePoint, for example, and you're trying to work with external teams, such is always the case with any project in our industry. All right, let's get started here. So starting off with the problem with spreadsheets. So I'm going to hit this number one error prone and manual hard because I find this to be the biggest negative, the biggest con, the biggest issue that we'll see with spreadsheets. That can be something very small, and that issue, that error potential can result in something very massive. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is, for example, if you're trying to pass a I don't know, budget line item, a bid leveling spreadsheet from team to team internal, and or if you're first receiving it from an external source like a GC or trade or an architect, and then you are moving data into your spreadsheet and then passing it to teams across your company. Internally speaking, if there is a single digit number that was accidentally pressed, accidentally changed, accidentally entered as the wrong number, obviously that could be a significant compounding effect. If, for example, you added an extra digit or you went from a 1 to a 9 and that was 1 million versus 9 million. So I think you could understand what I mean there. Really easy to make those errors as you pass, static files across different computers and devices. Second, of course, outdated information. A very similar dynamic where if someone doesn't realize there's an updated version on a SharePoint or Dropbox, for example, and they're still using an older format, just whatever file that has not been updated, obviously that can cause some significant issues downstream. And kind of what I mean by that is, if you can imagine, if an error wasn't picked up early up front, you might not realize that there's an error in that file, an error in whatever it is that you're trying to, build out. Again, using that example as a budget, using an example of a change order, or using an example of I don't know, a drawing comment. What ends up happening is, if that only gets picked up a week after, and you had one or two team members working on an outdated file, not only did you lose a week, but now you gotta understand how to merge updated data from one system, from the older file, into the now newer system week later. I mean, that's just significant delay across the board for whatever it is that you're trying to do. An example that comes up very frequently as well. Lost productivity, I think, from point 1 and 2. I relayed those examples of how that happens. Data entry, if you're inputting information for other individuals into your central um, spreadsheet, your central, whatever it is, native to your device, native and specifically hosted in your siloed device, that takes so much time versus, for example, again, if it was a central platform where each stakeholder, each respective individual is entering their respective information, you can simply log in and see all this data automatically compiled because it's a central source of truth versus siloed information. Hidden costs that I mentioned as it related to error prone and manual issues. Obviously, the more complex a spreadsheet becomes, the easier it also becomes to make an error across dozens of stakeholders, especially. All right, modern solution, automation, and software. centralized data. Not only is this helpful for reducing manual error issues, for reducing, just admin overhead, time, and cost. However, what it also is going to do in relation to creating centralized data is it'll allow you to truly leverage that data forward, especially in nowadays in today's time where data is the back end to any AI model or AI capability. So the sooner you're able to compile that data in a centralized platform, the sooner you'll be able to leverage that data for automations beyond simple, simple and obvious solutions like automated reporting or automated reminders. It is going to, it being data, is going to truly support your capability in leveraging AI moving forward, and relatively soon as well. Real-time collaboration, we kind of touched on that already. Obviously, that's going to significantly reduce admin overhead, significantly improve communications across teams, and just avoid rework, right? Because everybody's plugging into the same system. Everybody naturally is going to be on the same page, therefore. Um, and it will also therefore reduce busy work, as you see here below. Now, automated insights. If you're not using a central platform, then maybe you have a template on Excel, maybe you have a template somewhere else. Nonetheless, this information is going to have to be checked. It's going to have to be updated to ensure there's no errors. That relates to spreadsheets versus, for example, software where uh, and inputs, obviously anyone could have an input that's wrong regardless of it being software or being uh, a spreadsheet, siloed spreadsheets. The point is that you've significantly reduced the potential for error, and in many cases you've eliminated the potential for significant error as it relates to going over something, for example, like a budget, right? Over, for example, something like a pay app. And the reason I say that, and the reason that software will prevent such a circumstance is if you've locked in budgeted or contracted amounts, you therefore can't accidentally, click an extra digit on your keyboard and go over a payment application amount or invoice amount, because the system will automatically reject the fact that you're over whatever has been approved already. So that's just an example of how these automated insights will truly reduce the potential for error, reduce the potential for issues, and expedite all of what your teams are doing across the board, from project controllers to accounting teams to project management teams. ROI metrics, how software pays off. So I'll touch on this reduced errors real quick because that's really what I've been hammering on, right? We're avoiding uh, errors across the board, across different teams, by at least at a minimum, completely removing the potential for going over an amount that you had otherwise approved. Um, and then beyond that, of course, given that everyone's on a central platform, we're all going to understand that the information that's being looked at is the most up to date. So another potential for error in terms of rework by accidentally using an older version of something. Time saved. Again, you're seeing a lot of data here if you're reading along while you're listening, mainly pulled from Autodesk's reporting. So Autodesk surveys and research. Obviously, it's a huge company, so I like to kind of use the data that they end up pulling. And you're seeing here are really, very, very significant amount of time that gets reduced simply by using software versus, again, the manual capacity of email and texting and sending files over a Dropbox or SharePoint, for example. Um, so that's really faster projects. That's reduce errors, like I mentioned, which in effect is all resulting in this clear ROI capability, where you take this time, you multiply that time saved, you multiply that over, how many projects, over how many years, over how many teams, and obviously that's a significant amount of savings for your company. especially if you're leveraging a platform that's not going to price gouge. I'll just do a shameless plug there with Jet.Build, for example. Transitioning from spreadsheets, what it's like. So I think this tends to be the general friction point as it relates to adopting technology. And I think to give credit to our industry and not to, bash or be negative or something, typically, builders don't have dedicated IT teams or an IT person for that matter. So, it makes sense that you're, not going to be so keen on transitioning from either a platform that's not doing everything you need, a platform that's charging too much for you, or no platform at all, because you're busy with your day-to-day core responsibilities and necessities as a business, and you don't have the headspace or the time or the desire to therefore move from spreadsheets or other platforms onto something that's more relevant for you or more cost effective for you. So just saying, I hear you, I understand that, and it completely makes sense. That said, what we've done at a minimum, and you can take kind of our best practices, what we're doing at Jet.Build, and apply to whatever is relevant for you. I'll just give our example as kind of the use case, obviously, because I could speak to it. So number one is planning a pilot period, right? So what that could mean is creating a mutual action plan, creating KPIs as it relates to migrating the data, getting a sample, a sandbox, a proof of concept, really all the same words that mean the same thing in the end, which is to say, at a flip of the switch, you don't need to go from 0 to 100. Rather, you can create manageable steps toward the migration onto a solid platform by I have examples here. For example, selecting construction operations. Okay, we're going to move the data there. We're going to start leveraging the platform. We're going to start leveraging Jet.Build, for example, accordingly. You can start by just the budget. You can start by, you get what I'm saying, in a modular kind of a capacity. And in doing so, it'll allow you to, one, understand how the platform works, two, allow you to ramp up slowly but surely over time, and three, also allow you to learn at a curve that makes sense for you. So it's not going to be this one large, like I mentioned before, flip of the switch and everything breaks because you went too quick. Rather, you phase it according to whatever works. Another way that this phasing process works is identifying a single project. You can see what we wrote here. Run one project or one phase. So I mentioned that phase element. You could also look at it at a project basis. And what I mean by that is rather than a portfolio basis, right? So you can say, okay, I've identified this one project. I've identified these two projects. Whatever a small and manageable number means to you, obviously that's up to you and relevant to you in terms of what you perceive as being manageable. So you let's use the one project as an example. So you run that one project, make sure that you feel comfortable, make sure that you're providing feedback, make sure that your teams are joining the onboarding and training process and they're providing their feedback, make sure that feedback's being implemented, make sure you're understanding how to leverage the platform. And then once you get to that point of comfort, I'll call it, with the platform, with how the data is being managed, with leveraging the platform with your external teams, that's when you can start looking at rolling out and scaling across your portfolio. So that's going to be the planning, the importing the data, at least on that proof of concept phase, that pilot phase. I mentioned the team training element, which is going to be running through that proof of concept phase as well. So again, this is all kind of subjective to balancing what the recommendations are against how your team is absorbing the data, against the phase of the project or projects that you've identified, against your comfort level of software systems to begin with or not, right? So again, subjective to the capacity and capability of your teams. Nonetheless, it still should be a manageable process. Again, obviously, you got to dedicate time on a weekly basis. It doesn't have to be crazy. Um, but the goal here is to say, all right, eventually you're going to do that kind of hockey stick dynamic, right? Where you're going to start at a solid point. You're probably going to feel like you're losing productivity because you're learning new systems, you're moving to new systems, and then shortly thereafter, you're gonna spike up and quickly realize and experience the significantly increased productivity across your teams. Iterate and improve. The last one that I specifically called out, but I did mention that in terms of the POC phase, the proof of concept, is to make sure that it's not only you as, let's say, you're the lead in migrating, but to also make sure that really all of your teams are open, willing, understanding that they also should be providing feedback to make sure that all stakeholders are leveraging the platform sufficiently, correctly, expeditiously, product in a productive way. All right, getting buy-in from your team. So it's kind of just segueing off of that last point that I just made. This is very crucial, and the reason, before I dive into the points here, the reason I say this is very crucial is oftentimes, and again, this is not by any means is this a bash. It's really a recognition of how our industry operates. So many times, again, we don't have like a dedicated IT person, a dedicated project controls person, and therefore it's not necessarily on your mind to kind of designate roles, designate who's going to be taking lead on this implementation, designate who's going to be taking lead on feedback or on, scheduling the training and support accordingly. So this is really important to consider. And again, it may seem like a big lift or a big to do, but it's really not. It's really a simple dynamic, which is to say, designate really one person to, similar to how we have project managers, project coordinators, project engineers. Any one of these roles can take lead in this process and really just say, okay, I'm going to make sure I'll collect all of the feedback from each call. I'm going to coordinate that with the Jet.Build team, make sure that implementation is going properly. If there's someone new on our team, I'll make sure that they are included in the weekly recurring calls so that they also get trained up and that their feedback is heard if they have any. Um, Make sure that KPIs are aligned with what we need. I'm going to make sure that data is migrated. I mean, it's really all just working on the mutual action plan with the Jet team or any team for that matter. And it's really like a bullet point. If you think about it this way, it's like a bullet point action item meeting minute kind of a list. So super easy. End of the day, you just simply have to designate someone. So going to the bullet points here. Uh, Communication benefits, right? It's reviewing with the Jet.Build team, with your team, what your needs are, how a central software is going to support your efforts across the board, right? From pre-dev to all the way to project closeout, from your internal teams to your external stakeholders, and then to projects moving forward as it relates to leveraging that data for whether it's providing your client with a nice data package, whether it's leveraging that data for your asset management, facility management teams to use in case there's an issue, whether it's to leverage that data for performance reviews at the end of the project, for hiring or allocating teams on the next project, whether it's leveraging this data long term for AI. I mean, there's so many benefits, and it's very widely understood at this point what these benefits are going to provide and how necessary they are as it relates to implementing central platforms for your projects. Testimonials, if it's helpful, always feel free to ask. your reps or software providers for referrals or testimonials or similar examples, even in terms of how they've supported other teams and what's like kind of best practices per se, right? Designate champions, we already mentioned that. It could be really anyone on the team, really any person could do this. Just a matter of designating them to kind of take lead on the software migration and PLC for the team. And then training and support, we already touched on that pretty heavily, which is to just make sure KPIs and the mutual action plan is set. Make sure that if anyone was missing from any call, or if there's someone new, or if someone was out of office, now they're back. Just make sure that they get involved, because obviously if they don't, then they'll be lost. All right, so conclusion here: spreadsheets slow down real progress. I don't know how that's not super obvious at this point. Maybe it's not totally clear for our industry yet, uh, but it's not like you'd ever be using purely spreadsheets for pure accounting, like payment transaction, right? Everyone's got a QuickBooks of some sorts, so I think we're slowly but surely getting to that point in our industry where we're recognizing that it's an absolute necessity to leverage project controls for projects and teams. Automation delivers faster timelines, fewer errors, and more transparency. So again, remember, what happens if one person across the entire chain of command makes one keyboard fudge error, one keyboard number slip, whatever it may be. That's a potential for a very significant error that's not easy at all to catch across so many line items across all these teams. So rather than waiting for yourself to get into that position, and obviously, otherwise, if you've already experienced that dynamic, but rather than waiting for that situation to happen and then scrambling to figure out what, where, when, who this error occurred, start looking at software, see what it can do for you, and remove and or at least significantly reduce that potential for error. Of course, teams that modernize today stay ahead tomorrow. I touched on the capability that AI will have in the very near future. However, if you don't have your data sorted, AI is not going to be pulling from anything, right? So remember that the back end to all AI is going to be based off of the data input, the data meaning that AI has to pull from. So very important to consider when you start looking at long-term possibility of leveraging platforms. Explore technology solutions that fit your project needs. So, again, another shameless plug here. The reason that we built Jet in the way that we did is everybody needs a budget, everybody needs a schedule, everybody needs a set of drawings in order to build a project. So we're very much focused on the core needs that any project will have to leverage in order to succeed, or in order to exist, even for that matter. So just make sure that when you're looking at platforms, especially if you don't have an IT person or a project control person's in house, be sure that that platform you're looking at is actually something you need, and it's not something that you're going to look at once and it's shiny and then forget about it because you don't have time to shift how you build. So summarize all of that. Basically, we can say build smarter, not harder. And with that, we'll conclude our live webinar series number 2, Ditch the Spreadsheets. Again, I'm Adam Stark, Jet.Build co-founder. You can find us on www.jet.build, and or you feel free to reach out straight to me, Adam at Jet.Build. I'm happy to share this recording and this information. Just shoot me an email and ask for it. And appreciate you attending. If you have any ideas for our next webinar series, any topic ideas, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'd really appreciate that feedback. Always happy to hear from you and work from what you're looking to hear about. Cool. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye now.